Hi, I'm Mini David Bowie, and I can't wait for Amity Tracks to rank my records. I agree with everything Ray says, 100%. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. We are in the midst of Bowie week. Go back and check out the first video that we put out if you missed that. It's sort of an introduction to Bowie week, and we talked about the documentary Moon Age Daydream that came out, and talked about compilations. That's kind of some of the stuff that we did in the first video. But starting here, we're gonna get into I guess the meat of the of Bowie week, where we go through and rank the albums, 27 of them, and we're dividing it up into two videos just for time's sake. This video we're gonna go through 27 through 11, and really just kind of talk about these records and just kind of have fun with them. And then the final video in Bowie week here, we'll do the top 10 and talk about some live albums too, because you need to talk about live Bowie here. So why 27? I'm not really including soundtracks and all of that, and I am including Toy, which some people might or might not do. But so if you do that, you got about 27 studio albums. So let's get into it. Something's got to be last. So at number 27, what I have, and again, these are personal picks, right? But what I have, well, something biblical, right? The first shall be last, the last shall be first. Well, this is the first, and it's last. His debut album from 1967, David Bowie. Now I have, and I've got some of these on CD, especially these sort of last ones, but we will get to the vinyl. I've got the majority of Bowie here on vinyl. But I have this disc here, which is, this is the record that he put out on the Darum label, and it's kind of like Van Morrison with with his first studio stuff too. They have repackaged and repackaged and repackaged this material, so this is actually, it's a pretty good collection here. It's 27 tracks, so it's most of the stuff he recorded for Darum, and then what I have bracketed here is actually his first album. So this is one of those repackagings. Editor can put the original album art up here if you want to see what it looked like. But yeah, his first album. Well, I guess you can say nothing else in his catalog sounds like it, which I think is kind of a good thing. To me, and I guess maybe even because I kind of mix it up with a lot of these other songs in these sessions. But to me, it's this sort of uneasy mix of novelty song slash music hall. I'm not a big music hall fan. I, I can take it with the Kinks, with Ray Davis, but other than that, I'm not a huge fan. And I think at times Bowie has been somewhat embarrassed about some of these tracks. Although at other times I've seen him kind of embrace it, in interviews and whatnot. But who knows? It's not a big fan. It is kind of fun having this, the expanded CDs here, because I've got the Laughing Gnome on here, which may be his I don't know, worst song if you don't want to take it with a bunch of irony. Oh, anyway, that's my number 27. Well, jumping ahead 20 years later, I have number 26 from 1987, Never Let Me Down. Now, this is the only one that I actually do not have a physical copy of. I've been kind of going around looking for it. There was a local record store here that they had it on vinyl, and the guy wanted 30 something bucks for it. And I'm like, I mean, I told him, I was like, this is a really bad album. You know that, right? So you want to come down on the price? He's like, no, but it's Bowie. So anyway, I didn't buy it. But Never Let Me Down. Editor can throw up the album art there. I've listened to it enough. I know it. I don't know. Even in 1987, when this thing came out, you had to listen to it and say, "Wow, that's bad '80s production." It's this is one of the records, or I think the record where I've seen Bowie numerous times almost disown it. He expressed a desire to at least remix it, maybe even re-record some of it at times. I know there was that remix that came out however many years ago, but I don't know. It's kind of like Pink Floyd's "Momentary Lapse of Reason." It's still that album, it's still that album. Usually, even with some of these albums that are lower on this list, you can pull out some great tracks. At least some of the singles are pretty good. Even here, though, Day In and Day Out, I think is probably for me his most tedious single that you see on comps. Time Will Crawl is slightly better, but this is just drowning in big '80s production. In the wake of the success of Let's Dance, he was kind of unsure where to go for the rest of the '80s, and this is sort of the nadir. Never Let Me Down. All right, coming in number 25. I have 1999's Hours. Now, this one, I'll say this. This one at least kind of has, a pretty good kind of cohesive sound and feel to it. It's kind of sleepy, um, in some ways. Unfortunate album cover here. It's how you feel sometimes. I think. Listen, it sounds like I'm bashing Bowie. I love Bowie, but obviously I'm going to have some of this stuff to say about these lower end records. Don't worry, we will get to the amazing worshiping Bowie soon enough. But even great artists like Bowie have some stinkers. I don't know. Thursday's Child is good. I really like Seven, although he remixed it pretty dramatically, for release on some comps later, and I really like those remixes better than the version on here. But yeah, it's sleepy, kind of sleepy. All right, coming in at number 24. Now, number 24, a little tough for me because I've got a soft spot for 24, but I also know it's not really good. Uh, so kind of what do you do with it? It has a couple of pretty standout songs. So I'm talking about 1984's Tonight. Here's some vinyl. 1984's Tonight. Kind of like the album art. I know some people have been critical of it. I think it's kind of cool. The blue Bowie. But so the good. Blue Jean, I think, is a legitimate, catchy, great single. Loving the Alien, I think, is a fantastic song. That is in my top echelon Bowie songs. Unfortunately, it kind of gets lost on this album of otherwise not great stuff. Bowie himself sort of recognized a really good record, because, or a really good song. I'm sorry, not record. Loving the Alien, because that's one of the few songs he kind of continued to play live a little bit later. And I remember on the live from the reality, the album from the reality tour, he plays that. And I remember he kind of introduces it. He just sort of slags the album, but says this was a great, great song. And and I agree. I love it. In fact, I was able to pick up. I have this extended dance mix of Loving the Alien. Now I'm not sure how great it is on the dance floor, but I just dig the song, so it's cool to have these extended mixes of it. But yeah, and again, like I said about Never Let Me Down, this was in the wake, in the '80s, in the wake of this Let's Dance success, where he, like, for one of the only times in his career, wasn't quite sure where to go and what to do. He even talked about that. It's just he kind of knocked this out quick and wasn't real happy about it. There's some stuff with Iggy Pop on here. People slag on the God Only Knows, the Beach Boys cover. I don't think it's bad. I mean, it's not great, but I don't think it's bad. Anyway, a lot of this record is justifiably not that great, but Loving the Alien, fantastic song, and Blue Jean's cool. So All right. Number 23 is where I do have Toy. Now, this wins for me one of the worst album covers ever. I hate that. It's like, it's just creepy, but not in a great way. It's Bowie face on an infant, and it just. Eh. This is an interesting idea. So this came out in 2000. It wasn't released until 2022, till last year. So it's kind of one of these lost, sort of shelved albums. Interesting idea. Bowie wanted to revisit some of his earliest compositions. And so this is full of songs that he wrote, in the 60s, you know, mid to late 60s, but recorded with his band that he had, in 2000. And so sort of an updated sound, but and it's really interesting. I think some of these songs, were really sort of lost gems. Let Me Sleep Beside You is great. Uh, Toy or Your Turn to Drive, I really like. I love Conversation Piece. Conversation Piece, I think, is a beautiful song, gorgeous song. Now, the rest of this, now, I bought this box. This is actually a 3 CD set, so it's got Toy, and then it's got all the alternative mixes. I guess the recorded these songs multiple times, right? And actually, some of the alternative mixes are better than the ones he put on, or he's obviously Bowie isn't around to put this together, but that they put together. I think some of the alternative mixes were better. And then there's a third disc of sort of a more acoustic based versions of these songs, and it's an interesting journey. It is. I mean, it's I wouldn't call it substantial in the catalog, but it's good. It's good. All right, number 22. I have 2003's Reality. We're almost through the CDs here, so we'll get into the vinyl. But 2003's Reality. This was kind of interestingly, this was the last record that he toured for. And that was the one and only time I ever saw Bowie live. I did catch him on this tour, and just by coincidence, luck, whatever, that ended up being his final tour. Right? He never really went out on the road again after this, because it was on this tour, later that he had a pretty severe heart attack, and I think that kind of sidelined him. And we didn't actually, after this record, there was about a 10-year gap, right? Before the next one. So this one's pretty straightforward and almost in a. I mean, for Bowie, who's usually so innovative and exciting, kind of, I don't know. There's just something, I call it bland, but just kind of straightforward about it. That it's not what you sort of want from Bowie. Although to me, I think there's some standout tracks. New Killer Star, which was I think the single off of here, the opener. I think it's great. It's a great song, and I love Fall Dog. Say it again. Fall Dog Bombs the Moon. Love that song. Such a gem, and it's kind of buried near the end, But and the rest of it, like I said, it's not bad, but it's just it doesn't jump out at you. I don't think. Alrighty, moving right along here. So at 21, finally, we're going to dig down into the 70s, albeit his covers album, Pinups, from 1973. Wasn't it 73? Yeah, it's from 73. This was, the Spiders from Mars, his band with Mick Ronson and all that. They're running out of gas at this point, and so he kind of, I guess, when this is a move, although I guess you can credit Bowie for doing it pretty early, but a move a lot of artists make, especially nowadays, when they're running out of some gas and don't really, in my view, kind of lacking some inspiration, to do a covers album. It's interesting, he's doing covers album. It's mostly kind of British psychedelic songs, British garage songs, British pop songs from some of his contemporaries. I mean, he does "Here Comes the Night," which is from them. Van Morrison's early band. "See Emily Play" from Pink Floyd. "I Can't Explain" by the Who. Um, "Sorrow" is good. What else? "Shapes a Thing" from the Yardbirds. Where have all the good times gone from the Kinks? So, some fairly obvious choices. I'm gonna be honest though, I don't think they really improve on the originals. Sorrow, which was kind of the single and the song that's best known off here, is the best song on here, I think. But yeah, I guess it's interesting to get sort of this the glammy Spiders from Mars treatment on these interesting covers, but it's a covers album, right? All right, at number 20, I have what is technically his second record, although so many people even just totally disregard his real debut and they consider this kind of the real debut, but it's a second album, right? Also titled David Bowie, or sometimes titled Space Oddity, or in its, I think, initial release in the US, Man of Words, Man of Music, whatever you want to call it, from 1969. This is heavily acoustic and kind of folkish, but also, got some of that sort of Bowie weirdness too, which is cool. Um, you know, Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud is good. Memory of a Free Festival is good. I like Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed. But the elephant in the room here on this record is Space Oddity. One of his iconic songs, most iconic songs, brilliant songs, and shows his savvy too, right? He released it. This is 1969 when everyone's space crazy because of the moon landing, right? The Apollo 11 moon landing, the summer of 1969, and so even then Bowie knew when to cash in, on a space themed tune. But Space Oddity is brilliant. I mean, one of the great songs, and it looms so large. I think like Space Oddities up here, and the rest of this album is a bit below. So it almost it's almost too good for the rest of the material, and it just sort of overshadows, I think, a lot of the rest of the material. This has its charms. I know it has its fans. Space Oddity is brilliant. The rest of it, I think, is interesting, and some of it good. But yeah. All right. At number 19. Now, at number 19 is one that some of you may think I have a little low. I think some of you guys might have this higher. I think it has some brilliant songs on it, but I also don't really connect that much with a lot of the rest of it. So I'm talking about The Man Who Sold the World, which will be his third album, which was 1970. Now I have this. I have this kind of picture disc version of it, with that, and then there, if you can see, but there he is. So it's this kind of picture disc version of it. Here's the CD with the original album art there, so you can see that there. But yeah, The Man Who Sold the World. Here, I'll just kind of hold it up this way, so it's a little easier to see. In some ways, kind of maybe his hardest rock, almost kind of blues rock in some ways. Just great, gritty, great guitar work from Mick Ronson. First of all, first the great. I think the opener, the 8-minute opener, The Width of a Circle, is legitimately epic, awesome. Of course, the title track, "The Man Who Sold the World," is one of his great songs, famously covered, by Kurt Cobain and Nirvana on their Unplugged album. But I prefer Bowie's original. That song is brilliant. Here's the thing: the rest of it though doesn't really hit me. Like I really do like the Superman, but I like there's a more acoustic version that he does, and it was put on as a bonus track on the kind of the Ryko disc Hunky Dory edition, which I prefer that version more than the one on here. I think the one on here is a little kind of plodding. So it's kind of a great blues rock, kind of hard rock album. But other than The Width of a Circle and the title track, the rest of it doesn't really grab me, song for song, if that makes any sense. All right. Coming up here next. So we're at 18 now. Oh, I said next. I mean the next day, right? From 2013. Now, this was released after a 10-year gap. After Bowie's health scare from the reality tour, he really just kind of put music aside. Wasn't very active at all. And I don't know if you guys remember the release of this, but it was one of those first times where, I mean, this was kept like, it was like state secrets. I mean, all the band, everyone involved in it was sworn to secrecy, and it really was. And I don't know if you guys remember this. He just put it out online. It was sort of available online first, and then eventually some physical copies. But with no, well, actually, if I remember right, he put out the song, right. He put out where is it? Where Are We Now? The single, and that's the one that was just dropped. There hadn't been any new Bowie music in 10 years. I remember everyone was like freaking out, like new Bowie, and then this new album coming out. Now, I mean, you got to talk about the album art. Some people really bothered by it. I like it. It's kind of cheeky, you know. I mean, it's got his iconic album art from Heroes underneath, and he, scratches out Heroes and puts his name there, and then slaps the next day on, the front of what was the Heroes album art. Um, and then, yeah, you even have the back cover of the Heroes with this slapped on here with the new songs on it. I think it's kind of cool. And it's kind of a reference too, that this record, he's sort of looking back for the first time. Where Are We Now really does sort of look back to his kind of Berlin period. The Stars Are Out Tonight is great. Where Are We Now? I know some people were a little disappointed. It was a little too slow. I think it's pretty. Dancing Out in Space is great. I love that. That's a great, it's got great pop sensibilities on that. But it was good. I thought it was good. It was a nice return, and the rollout was fantastic. Now, number 17. This will be the last CD. It'll be vinyl from here on out. I've got Black Tie, White Noise, which was sort of his comeback record after the Tin Machine detour, which I'm not including here. I'm not including the Tin Machine stuff, which is that little side band he had, right, for a couple albums. This has really grown on me. I like this one. This one, Bowie fans are, sort of mixed on this. This one's really great. It just got a kind of a nice sort of kind of dance feel to it. Real consistent sound. Um, I think the what was that single? Jump They Say. Excuse me. Jump They Say. I think is a great single. If I remember right, he wrote that song in part about his half brother who had schizophrenia. Um, yeah, we can find that in the lyrics. It's a great song though. I like Night Flights. I really like this. I mean, it's got kind of a sort of a modern groove to it. Modern for the time. When it come out, this was 1993 when this came out. So kind of getting into his 90s period. I like it. All right. So number 16. This one, in my preparation for Bowie Week, when I was sort of re-listening to not the whole catalog because I'm very familiar with a lot of it, but when I was just trying to refresh my memory on some of these that I didn't remember as well. This one, when I did my initial list before I was really re-listening, this one jumped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 slots, forward. I really like this. This is Buddha of Suburbia. The Buddha of Suburbia. And I told you I wasn't going to include soundtracks. Okay, this is kind of a soundtrack, but it really does stand as a Bowie album too. I think this was a soundtrack for this is a British television show, but it stands as a Bowie album. Now it does feel a little soundtracky because there are some instrumental tracks on there that clearly kind of soundtracky, but I'm a sucker for soundtrack. I love soundtracks. I love instrumental music. So and it's a great mood. And there's some killer songs on here. "Strangers When We Meet" is one of his great latter day songs. And I say latter day, so let's say into the 90s and beyond. A great song. And you can tell he knew that was great song because This album kind of disappeared. It hardly did anything. Pretty disappointing, sales wise, and it just kind of disappeared. And you could tell he really wanted that song to get some more recognition because he puts that same song on Outside, which we'll talk about later. But another album, he's like, it's almost like, okay, now listen to this song again. It's great. I think Dead Against It is fantastic as well. It's just got a great feel to it. I think underrated, underrated this album. All right, number 15, 1997's Earthling. Earthling. Now, David Bowie is renowned for kind of leading, right? Leading in new trends, and then people follow. In the 90s, I think it's a fair, I'm the first to say this, but I think it's fair to say that he was kind of following some trends in the 90s. And this maybe more so than anything on Earthling, because he kind of wanted to get into sort of the Nine Inch Nails sound. He was friendly with Trent Reznor, kind of the drum and bass, sort of some of the electronica stuff, the kind of that techno stuff, the kind of hard, drum and bass really. And that's what this is. It's kind of relentless in that way. But I have it ranked where it ahead of a lot of other records, because I think underneath all that, and I actually don't mind the sound. I think there's some really good songs, like really well written songs. The Little Wonder, I think, is Looking for Satellites, Battle of Britain. I think it just flows really well. I'm Afraid of Americans, which was the single off of here, is great. I That's the difference. Is okay. He's following the trends, and he's sort of decorating these songs, with the drum and bass and all that. But underneath, I think there's some really solid songwriting here, which makes the record good. All right, moving along here. Number 14, 2002's Heathen. This is a great record. Love this record. And when this came out, it was seen as sort of a back to form. Bowie's back. Like you always hear. And legitimately great. It's just got a great mood to it. He put some really interesting covers on here, like Cactus, and this fantastic Neil Young cover, I've Been Waiting for You, which is one of Neil Young's great songs. And Bowie does a fantastic job of that. But his originals are good. There's just kind of like there's a real consistent mood. Oh, I think I Took a Trip on a Gemini Spaceship is also a cover. Although I'm just drawing a blank. I don't remember who originally did that. But yeah, there's 3 covers, but well chosen covers that fit right in with the mood. Slip Away. No, actually, Slip Away is a good song, but Slow Burn. Slow Burn was a single. That's really good. Yeah, there's not a bad song on here. I think this really flows well, and one of the great latter day Bowie records. All right. 13, 12, 11. We're finally kind of getting back into sort of the classic Bowie period here. At number 13, I do have Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. This record, in some ways, kind of closes the door on his amazing 70s streak. In some ways, it's kind of a culmination of that. It's sort of looking back at all the different parts of his 70s era. It's a pretty remarkable record. And, the guitar work on here. Pete Townsend actually plays on Because You're Young, which is kind of cool. But Robert Fripp is all over this record. Listen to his guitar work on Teenage Wildlife. Just Fripp goes nuts, man. It's so great. I know Fripp is so celebrated for being, for playing on like Heroes and all that, but I think the best place to hear Fripp with Bowie is here. It's just so great. But when I say even looking back, I mean, you've got even in the album art, like Heroes and Lodger and Low, you have references to the earlier albums and stuff. But yeah, it's great. I mean, this really is great. And And it does kind of slam the door shut on what many people consider his classic period. Because this is what came before Let's Dance, right? Which, note, we have not seen yet. Number 12, 1975's Young Americans. His Plastic Soul album, right, where he sort of moves away from the glam, and he's sort of fascinated with sort of Philadelphia soul, and one that makes a soul album. And people talk about sort of the Plastic Soul was the term for it. I just think it's a great album. I mean, again, it's just great songwriting. Whatever genres he wants to play with. The title track, of course. Do you remember President? Yeah, I mean it's classic. That great sax work. Great sax work. But even some of the lesser known, like Wind, Fascination, I think those are great kind of funky songs. And then Fame, of course, is the other really well-known song on here, which was co-written with John Lennon. And John Lennon is actually on the backing vocals. Although you always wish that Lennon's voice, it's hard. You only know it because you read it in the credits and you hear about it. But I mean, honestly, if you listen to the song, it's not like you're going to, oh, there's John Lennon in there. He's so buried in the mix. I wish Lennon's voice had been lifted in the mix a bit. But yeah, great stuff. And very much a transitional thing, right? From the glam stuff earlier, and then into his experimental period with what came right after. Okay, so rounding out this video at number 11, I do have 1979's Lodger. Okay, 1979's Lodger. There he is. Hold it up like this. Let's do this. The third record in the what's known as the Berlin trilogy, basically the 3 records he did with Brian Eno. Although I'm going to be honest with you, this one's kind of an outlier in that trilogy. I think Low and Heroes, which obviously we'll talk about in the next video, go together. I mean, they're like companion pieces. This one, I don't know. I think it's thrown in there in the Berlin trilogy because it's just Eno's involved in it. But this one sounds different. These are more structured songs, but it's very much kind of art rock and still really experimental. What's interesting about this is it's, I think, very experimental, but within more structured songs than you had in Low and Heroes. I think that so he kind of slips in the art rock and slips in the experimentation with more straightforward songwriting. And you talk about great guitar players. I talked about Robert Fripp being on Scary Monsters. Adrian Belew is all over this one on guitar. And of course Belew and Fripp would come together in King Crimson starting in the 80s. But Belew's guitar playing is great on here too. So hold it up like there. So yeah, I think this this is fantastic. Something that just came to mind going back to let me grab it here. Going back to Scary Monsters, I should have mentioned Ashes to Ashes on here. I think Ashes to Ashes, going back to Scary Monsters, which is at number 13. It's one of the great singles. And I love it how sort of, lyrically, thematically, it's almost a sequel to Space Oddity. I mean, he refers to Major Tom, right? But anyway, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ashes to Ashes, because that is one of the great songs. Well, all right, guys. I was trying to keep this as short as we can. We had a ton of records to go through. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. So please, please do, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content. Like the videos, all of that great stuff. I'm curious your thoughts on what we've done so far. If you're a big Bowie fan, you know what's left for the top 10 in the next video, which is coming up. But of these records that we did discuss here, what do you guys think? Let's talk about it in the comments. You agree with some of my rankings? Disagree? Some of the ones I mentioned today, do they belong in the top 10? Should they be in the next video? All that fun stuff. So stay tuned for the next video. Top 10 David Bowie albums, at least according to me. And we'll also talk about live Bowie albums as well, which is an important topic also. All right. Thank you, guys. Take care.